It was founded in 1993, so we're approaching our 20-year anniversary, and I was looking at some of the articles that we were running in 1998. One of them, ICANN, at stake is the power over the underpinnings of the net, as well as millions of dollars in the form of domain name fees and the business value of domain names. Another one in November 1998, this is right at the time of ICANN's first meeting. A notable fraction of the 300 attendees, that's grown, charged that the process of selection was too secretive and that the board was accountable to no one. Some things happen. But I'd like to introduce the person who, more than anyone else, brought you here this evening. He runs the Electronic Privacy Information Center in Washington, D.C., and has been involved in domain name and internet for quite a while. He and I are both on Red Eyes tonight because he has to testify tomorrow in Washington, D.C. I give you Mark Rotenberg.
I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight. This event is sponsored by the EPIC Public Voice Project. Was established more than 15 years ago with the goal of encouraging public participation in decisions concerning the future of the internet. Then this thing called ICANN came along. That's cool, but we still like to get our friends together and have events like we're having tonight. We have a great panel. We're very happy you're all here. John Markoff, who's the New York Times and a good friend for many, many years, is going to be leading our discussion about acronyms. We only get to use one, ICANN, and after that we're going to try to speak English. So I won't take any more of your time.
I will be on your case.
That's the Federal Bureau of Investigation. So without any further delay,
thank you. Hi, Joe. How are you? You know how well we've done with no-fly zone, so let's see if we can make this a no-acronym zone. Hopefully we'll do better than the world has done so far. So I want to introduce people first, and we're supposed to have this is a town hall, so we're going to try to draw you in as much as we possibly can, and then we also have this hashtag. And since I'm not able to get a Twitter feed on my iPhone, we'll give it a shot. So we're going to try to do this in multiple dimensions. But let me first introduce our participants. Olivier Crepin-LeBlanc, let's see, right next to me. Chair-at-Large Advisory Committee and a veteran internet technologist. Whitfield Diffie, to his right, is the co-inventor of public key cryptography and ICANN Vice President of Information Security and Cryptography. And if you want a great picture of Whit as a young man, you have to look at my book, Dormouse, from probably 1970.
It would be a better picture if the fool who were taking it managed to get it right the first time.
Aubrey Doria is chair of the non-commercial stakeholder group, to Whit's right. Computer engineer and a Tunisian blogger. Is that correct? Is that fair? Good. Lauren Gelman is the founder of Blurry Edge Strategies, and I'd love to know where that name came from, the School Center for Internet and Society. Robin Gross is chair of the Non-Commercial Users Constituency and co-founder of IP Justice for Balance and Intellectual Property Law. Are you down on that?
Former chair.
Former chair, I'm sorry. Okay. Declan McCullough, of course, is CNET's chief political correspondent. That's the case. Paul Vixie is now chief scientist in the Systems Consortium, which develops Bind and other essential internet software. And I'm John Markoff, and my earliest credential on my way machine on the ARPANET in 1979, and the deal was if you could get there, you got an account. And I got an account, because I wanted to read HumanNets, which was this great mailing list that discussed the social impact of technology. It's been all downhill since then, believe me. That's true. So it's been 3 decades since Werner Binge observed how students were using early bulletin board systems at San Diego State College at that point, and he wrote this book called True Name. We have a lot to talk about tonight, but I really wanted to start with identity, because I think identity sort of brings lots of things, privacy, security, community together. And it's been framed recently, as a computer scientist at San Diego.
This room is that we have a very, very diverse mix between the two, depending on the countries across the globe. So there's a report on internet freedom in various countries, and there's a report coming out soon, and you'll see there's like a very big divergence between looking at how much free speech people have in the United States versus how much free speech people have in Tunisia or in what?
No, it's okay.
Well, in places where there has not yet been a revolution, you know, that there's a real divergence, and yet we're talking about one architecture. And so your question sort of supposes, well, what architecture should we have, given that the policy on top of this is going to be implemented in places where there are very different ways of balancing that. I happen to think in the United States, free speech is very, very well here, and because of, especially with, I mean, you asked Blurry Edge strategies. Blurry Edge comes from my thinking about social media as being that we don't really know everything in our social network. And what social media is letting us do is disclose things about ourselves and find other people online who are interested in the same things. Well, to build community, we have to disclose first. And what, you know, Facebook companies are doing are monetizing that. They're helping us connect with other people. It is in their interest for people to keep disclosing. I think the problem is, if you know, you look at like what's happening in Europe with push towards a right to delete, and I think this goes just to Whit's point, which is there used to be a way to move west, or for kids to be kids and then go on to become adults without their childhood following them. So binary world, and you can sort of set up a binary choice between being identified or being, you know, identity or presumed to be doing something wrong to require anonymity. And I think that the answer to that question in this room has to be, like, the architecture needs to support what happens in Tunisia from a freedom perspective.
Lydia, did you want to make a comment?
Well, I just have a rhetorical question here. Whose choice should it be at the end? Should it be your choice to remain anonymous, or should it be someone else's choice?
Does this mean, so the U.S. government is pursuing this this plan of trusted identities, which I'm weak on analogies, but it moves in the direction, I would think, of an internet driver's license, if we can use that analogy. Is that a non-starter?
I'm sorry, is your question a non-starter, or is there action a non-starter?
Feel free to pick either.
Well, okay, so a lot of my concern about our move to an identification society is that it moves power out of the community to remote parties. So if Washington refuses to issue identity, or you know, Sacramento refuses to issue an identity, then you're screwed. And the you have lots of circumstances. People have begun to say they're going to ID everybody at the bar, even though you're obviously 60, not 20. Right? And so we don't impose the rule of search that there has to be some reasonable suspicion. Right? And that gives some remote party tremendous power over social behavior. Now, as for, I asked at EPIC's board meeting, I asked Howard Schmidt what I think is the critical question. Could this identities program imagine the possibility that you might no longer have a right to IP access to the internet? Because I think that's a tremendous danger. And he said, sort of, in the style of people who are thinking about using their nuclear weapons, he said, nothing is off the table, or something.
When you say IP,
I mean, right now, you can plug into the internet at IP level. You can get an IP address, you can send and receive, right? You can't do that with a phone system. It's not only very expensive, but it's in many places regulated. You can't become, I think it's called a class 1 switch or something. You can't get real ANI information. You just get this, you know, censored caller ID and stuff. But if you can connect to the telephone system as a first-class citizen, you get all sorts of powers that you don't have as when you pick up a telephone. But right now, in principle at least, I know you have to be a bit geeky and might cost some money, but the one is you can get directly IP connected to the internet, and you can talk directly to other IP addresses, and there could be a community of people who ignores ICANN and DNS, all the rest of that, and does it differently. Over to you.
There's two levels of problems with the government's proposal. One level is the idea of having to use that identity for everything. So if you want to comment to the government on some sort of proposal, now you can only do it while using your and not being able to be anonymous. The second level of problem is the idea of unique identity rather than being able to have multi-identities for multi-purposes. And this goes to this sort of, using the Mark Zuckerberg comment about doing everything under the same identity. So, for example, the comments that you leave on the New York Times have to be attached to your OpenID, as well as the comment, or as well as your purchases from someplace else, or your comments to the government, or your voting. So, having to do lots of different things with that you would want different levels of security with one identity. That now creates you're using very weak security for a login for the New York Times comments on a markup article, and you have to use the same ID for other purposes.
Two quick thoughts. I was sitting with David Sobel, who worked for the Electronic Privacy Information Center, no acronyms. Circa 1999, we were both at a congressional hearing, and we were listening to the FBI director say, well, it would be very nice to have an internet driver's license, and you couldn't get online without it. So this is to say that there's nothing necessarily wrong with some sort of stronger ID if it's driven by the private sector, but the question is whether this is being driven by commerce concerns or law enforcement concerns, and where do the two bleed over. And the second point is, to respond to Whit's observation about doing things outside of ICANN. Carl Auerbach, who's in the back of the room over there, say Carl, wave below, spoke last Friday at an event here saying that there are ways to do this outside of ICANN. There are ways to do competing, non-overlapping routes, and I think it's an essay up at kbear.com. So it's an interesting alternative approach that gets you out of this entire debate.
Third-party disclosure, Declan over there is a libertarian, you see. It's all right. It's done by government. It isn't all right.
Maybe we shouldn't have that debate.
We'll argue this one later.
We have one from the audience. Maybe identify yourself.
John Deneen, I'm associated with Rocketteam. I'm just really curious this discussion. It seems to me it's very hard to debate for the new products with all the relational databases. For example, the security things.
You're holding one up now.
Yeah. You can do a Google search on your profile, and you show up, at your bank or drugstore, grocery store. How do you remain anonymous?
It's going to get harder.
Yeah.
Quickly.
Carl wants to make a point too, and then.
Yeah, I've actually heard two.
Carl, do you want to come over here and grab a mic briefly? This is just for the purpose of
I can get really loud.
You could, if you want to yell.
Okay. I don't know what the on button is on this.
It is on. Just
Okay. I'm hearing two distinct threats. You were talking about what I heard as multiple identities, not anonymity. The issue being that you couldn't link between them. That at different times you wanted to be different people, but you still have an identity for each of those people, and you weren't linking between them. I distinguish that from true anonymity.
And then to dedicate
Okay.
Daniel Del Solar, Public Broadcasting Manager of a non-commercial TV in Philadelphia, non-commercial radio station here in San Francisco. And it seems to me that we have to put this issue in context. In a democracy, where is there access to unpunishable communications? Nowhere in 95 or 99% of our media can you be anonymous, except for calling, and they have your phone number. So to have this discussion on the internet, which is a place where democracy could find new ideas, full expression of pro and con, it is important to save that space, because the media, the church in the old days was the media. That's where everybody got their information and their values. But now our media does that for us, and as well as the church, supplemented by the church. There's no discussion, it's generally top-down. And only peer-to-peer in this new media. And I hadn't thought of it so much, but I do think that anonymity will lead to truth-telling, because truth-telling of a really important sort will inevitably get you in trouble. Just see what happened to Julian Assange. I mean, this was the most important communication, to know how my government money is being spent. And he and his potential cohorts are suffering miserably. You know, waterboarding is not torture. And that poor corporal who's naked every night in suicide gear. This is Manning, this business. So we do need a space. We need a space to communicate. We need a space to tell, to talk, to speak truth to power. Where else can we do it? How else can we do it?
If I can.
I'm done.
Please keep your remarks brief, because we have other subjects. Thank you.
It's a big subject.
Yeah, I'm from India, and I have a question for somebody from the West, and preferably from US. And to me, my country, my government does not have my fingerprints. Your government has your fingerprints, and I don't have to carry my passport or driving license to buy orange juice, but you have to. So to me, it looks like. Apparently, it's a free country, it's a free world, but to me, it appears to me that the West is more controlled, more scientifically controlled.
Than we think. We humor ourselves. Yeah.
To me, it appears that your environment is very harsh.
There are two more comments, and then I'm going to give Paul the last word. So then we'll move on. Two more comments, and then I'll give you the last word, Paul.
Thank you. I'm Jean-Jacques Subrenat. I'm a member of the ALAC, that means the At-Large Advisory Committee of the ICAP, where I represent EuroLaw, which is the European component. I'd just like to underline a paradoxical feature. We can call it one of the paradoxes of modern internet, which is there's a sort of curve. And the outgoing curve is that when you are in a country or in a situation where there is censorship and of human rights and civic rights, etc., then the internet is obviously considered prime tool, as we have an example from Tunisia recently, of gaining and affirming that liberty, the liberty to express oneself. There is a purpose. Towards the end of the Cheney administration, certain events of some importance were used in a way which, you know, the Patriot Act, etc., come to a denial of, or amount to a denial of certain basic rights. So I think that those are the two extremes. And I think it is our duty, when we have one small part of the stewardship of the internet, to think about potential developments, and to always aim for anonymity as a space for free expression and the exercise of human and civic rights. I think that the way things are happening in the US are a bit excessive. My conclusion is that you cannot dissociate this debate from the political system in which it is exercised. If I were a Swiss citizen, I'd be more comfortable with a certain degree of control, because I know that the way in which it would be decided that the state, the federal state in the case of of Switzerland requires my identity when I go and buy oranges, to take the Indian analogy. I'd feel better about that than living in the United States for the same purpose. So I think we cannot dissociate that from the political system. And for all intents and purposes, today, I think that there is still a very strong case in favor of an amendment.
One final comment from the audience, and then Paul. And then
the night before January 28th, it didn't help deterring. The revolution continued. Catalyst being the key word. Things started online. They were organized. Rafi also mentioned Ghunaim, the Google executive, who started a Facebook page called Kulina Khaled Saeed, or We Are All Khaled Saeed. Khaled Saeed was a 20-year-old young person living in Alexandria. He was just a regular guy. It's happened before a million times, where someone is arrested for one reason or another. It wasn't really a big deal why he was arrested, but the fact was that he was beaten so hard that he died. So that's what the Google executive, he started an anonymous identity. And I want to also differentiate, I think Carl said about anonymous not being something where you actually have a false identity. It's not identity theft, but being anonymous was very helpful in this situation. He started this page and he was basically telling young people in Egypt, we are all headed by it. This could have happened to anybody.
To your point on Catalyst, is the mistake that the Mubarak government made not shutting the internet down quickly enough?
No, you know what? By the time it started on January 25th, all right, let me put it this way. There was a press conference very recently before January 25th, where a reporter asked Gamal Mubarak, the former president's son, on what he thought about people on Facebook and the young children on Facebook who were talking about all these things. Everybody in the world actually assumed that if a revolution ever happened in Egypt, it would be maybe a Muslim movement, a religious extremist movement, or possibly one that was driven by poverty and people who live in what we call slums or ashwayat. But that wasn't the case. And when Gamal Mubarak was asked this question about what he thought about people on Facebook, his response was to just laugh. So they didn't see it coming. By the time January 25th arrived, and by the way, January 25th, the reason that day was chosen was because that's the national day to commemorate the police force. So that's why the revolution started on January 25th. And by the time that started, it was too late to do anything. Because that's the nature of a catalyst. I'm from a medical background originally. And the nature of a catalyst is that you don't have to have a catalyst available throughout the entire chemical reaction. It's used to start it. It's just used to ignite it. And that's what the internet did. We did have a lot of organizing, like Rafi said. It was extremely detailed. The organizing was extremely detailed on the routes that people would take during the demonstrations, on the cleanup efforts afterwards, on the fact that we have to be peaceful. The word Silmiya was always used a lot. And so the internet, without it, there's no way this would have happened. Satellite TV channels, there's something else I'd like to mention. We have a Ministry of Information, or we had one until January 25th. I don't think this phenomenon exists anywhere else. You actually have a government agency that is responsible for the content that is broadcasted on TV and on satellite channels.
There's China, there's North Korea.
Well, not officially, let's say that. So the internet was a catalyst. Without it, this never would have happened. Thank you. And sorry, one more thing. I want to touch back on I know you said we have to move on beyond anonymous and everything, but I think it's important to relate what happens online with what happens in the real world. Regulating whether someone can be anonymous online or not, I don't think that's a good idea. When you have a little kid who goes to school, you always teach him not to talk to strangers. You don't make it illegal to be a stranger. That doesn't make sense. I would say the solution would be raising awareness on what you should be doing online and who you should be talking to, but not illegal, and making it illegal.
Thank you.
Thank you. I really liked that, but I want to be pedantic and question the use of the word catalyst. Because in describing that a catalyst only needs to start it there, doesn't need to continue the reaction, the change, is indeed true. The other thing about a catalyst, though, is that it remains unchanged. after this reaction. And so I think I'm asking the question, and I think we're still going to find out, but does indeed the internet remain unchanged given its use, given its effect? And is that one of the things that we need to sort of be watching for, is sort of what changes happen to the internet as a result of its incredible usefulness as a tool, as a precipitating agent, as opposed to a catalyst? But thank you.
Olivier, did you have Facebook or even a post office when the French Revolution happened? I did, and I was reading some of those messages, but they were all in Arabic, so I couldn't understand them.
So let me pose the question. I mean, there was a circumvention movement, and then with the events in Egypt, when an entire country for a period of days was taken off of the network, I think the circumvention issue changed in some fundamental way, perhaps. At least I wanted to pose the question: what does it mean when a country can push itself off the global network? Does it matter? Is it possible?
Yes, it's possible. It's possible that you make the world a virtual world just by shutting down the post office. People will find a way.
But to communicate, perhaps. But
you shut down the internet, you shut down the telephone, and will the world become a virtual world?
Paul. So the question is asked, did the catalyst change as a result of the reaction? The internet is not a thing. I know we treat it as a noun, we even capitalize it as a proper noun as though it was a person or a corporation or whatever. It is not a thing, it is an emergent property. It is the result of a whole lot of different people building small networks and connecting them together with various rules and various contracts and various capacities. And I think it has changed, and that's, I think, the answer to your question. There are, no doubt, countries right now whose governments are trying to figure out how to monitor the internet better so that if organizing movement is happening and there's a revolution that is forming and people are figuring out how to march peacefully on certain routes and clean up afterward, so that they can see that coming and not laugh about it. I think they are probably figuring out where the power switches are so that they can shut it off more effectively than was done in the recent examples, because it never quite went all the way down in the recent examples. So I think the internet is going to show itself to be a little bit more monitorable and a little bit more fragile the next time some country is about to boil over. On the other hand, the rest of the internet that is not in those places is likely to be strengthened by these events, and people are likely to protect those power switches better and put more backup links in place and make sure that sort of thing can't happen quite as easily. And I think ultimately it's going to be more stronger than weaker as a result of these events. Yes.
We talked about censorship. The strange thing that I think Egypt, I think that Egypt didn't have any censorship or internet filtering platform. When Tunisia had, and the whole Tunisian network, internet network was designed that everything will pass through the Tunisian Internet Agency. So the Tunisian government had the opportunity to really shut down the Tunisian internet in effective way. But they didn't that for a strange reason. When in Egypt they didn't have really that, they didn't design their network to be shut down in an effective way, but they did. I don't know what is the reason, but it shows that the government, even if they're trying to filter the internet, they still don't understand how to handle it. But what they are doing mostly now is not really the internet filtering, but it's maybe the most feasible thing, but it's not the surveillance. They're trying to monitor the activity of the user. Amr talked about the case of the state security in Egypt. What people find that the government were monitoring Skype chat. The government has a password and login for Gmail and other accounts. For Tunisia, what happened during the revolution, especially for Facebook, there was a big phishing operation to try to harvest the login and password of Facebook user. So, internet filtering even is still visible and it's something that we need to fight against. But governments and many authoritarian governments, they are trying more to do surveillance to monitor the activities. I don't know if they try to monitor the activities of the whole internet user is something effective. It's possible, but what they are doing now.
Just a small technical note that I haven't seen discussed in the discussion of cutting off countries from the internet, but I think there are at least 2 and perhaps 3 companies, I think not all of them are U.S., that are now building low Earth orbit satellite networks to provide internet connectivity. And so this may not be, it may be a very different situation 3 or 4 years from now when the globe actually has, point to multi-point kinds of internet technologies. Any other thoughts, particularly on the flip side, that your government's keeping the internet up to use as a surveillance tool? It's come up a number of times.
I can say it from here. The United States is a leader in monitoring everybody's conversation. Keyword searches, the big scoops in Australia and in England and wherever. Echelon. Remember Echelon? Hit the New York Times a while. And then it went under because it's a secret thing and so nobody talked about it. But we are leaders in this. And there's, the other countries are all catching up, but the United States knows how to do it.
The United States leads the generation from freedom to control.
So perhaps maybe we should talk briefly about our internet, the United States internet freedom agenda. I'm sorry?
You said internet freedom.
Well, that's what it's described as, yes.
Well, if I were being snarky, I'll say it's freedom for everyone else except folks in the United States. But if I were to more seriously, I mean, this is what Secretary of State Hillary Clinton set forth in a landmark. It was described at the Times speech early last year at the museum in Washington D.C. She laid out what she viewed as a set of principles for freedom in a digital era, the freedom of access, and so on. And then she reiterated that in another speech in D.C. recently. The problem is that WikiLeaks happened in between, released the WikiLeaks disclosures that everyone cared about. WikiLeaks was around before, and so that opened the State Department up to charges of hypocrisy. I mean, but on the other hand, the Clinton, neither the State Department nor the White House applied any pressure on any U.S. company, as far as we know, to take down or censor WikiLeaks. There are thousands of mirrors, hundreds in the United States, and those have been unmolested. And so maybe there's actually something there. I mean, there's been no indictments yet of anyone beyond Bradley Manning, as far as we know.
Hasn't been indicted.
Well, he's been charged with a crime, and that happened in approximately May of 2010. I mean, and more charges were added in the last month. Yes.
Hello, I'm George Victor. I'm from Egypt too, but working for the government. So actually I'm here to mention only 2 points.
Do you still have a job?
Yeah. The first one is about the cut-off internet in Egypt during the revolution, and I have one thing to add is that it was very stupid to make such a decision, and allow me to say that this is not a technical decision. This is pure decision taken from the Interior Ministry police. So, and actually what happened when the internet is shut down in Egypt, many people were staying at home tweeting and checking their Facebook, and while there is no internet, so they all shut down their laptops and went to the square to join the The second point is that back to 2009, and I'll be talking here about the point of the internet as a catalyst. I had the opportunity, and now I don't think this was an opportunity, to did some work with the National Democratic Party. And we tried a lot to convince them that in order to have popularity in the street, we have to have a cause, not only having online presence and saying the same. And this is what happened, like Amr mentioned in the page of Khaled Said. The point is that people did not went to revolution without any cause. There was a cause in real life named Khaled Said who pushed people to create a fan page then to go for revolution. So I believe that the internet is a catalyst, but there must be a cause in our real life to push people in whatever they're saying.
Thank you.
Sorry, one more phrase. Full room dominance. I'm against it.
I wanted to touch just briefly on Japan as well. Very different kind of crisis, and I just wondered if there's any indication that members of the past of the internet playing a role other than a media. Is it having other, a conduit for donations and things like that?
As how to say, I left Japan 1 week before the earthquake. So there is something important that Japanese people use a lot Twitter. I think there are millions of users there. And they start to tweet a lot. It's like a custom in Japan when there is an earthquake. I know from Twitter directly when there is they tweet it a lot, and they try to share information like where are the shelter people to go, and to try to share information about press conference, etc. Because the problem then, phone line were down just after the earthquake, not because there is a problem in per se, but decision to let only emergency calls to the Lifeline network. But people use it a lot internet. I had to know that the earthquake happened because an important person for me was stuck near to the earthquake. Sent me an email with her mobile to say that I am alive. I was here, I know, I saw that message and tried to find what's happening. And people trying to share information as they can. They try to share, like how to say, survival actions that and also like about electrical outage, about water shortage, etc. But it's mostly what I can see that it's mostly in Tokyo. I mean, not in the north area.
because then they have more problem to charge their phone. So for them, they cannot really those who stuck in North Japan, no, they cannot really use the internet. It's mostly the people in Japan, in Tokyo, who are really afraid because the radiation are sharing the information. So I'm just following what's happening, and they have a contradictory information about the radiation, etc.
Does anybody know about the impact of Google's People Finder? Whether it was effective in any significant? Paul, would you? Many networks went down, but the internet by and large seemed to be largely unaffected. Is that sort of the?
Yeah, the mobile devices that were using data and text messages largely continued to work, because although voice calls were either blocked or there wasn't enough capacity for the voice call volume, data is fairly cheap as far as banking airtime is concerned. There is a concern now about running out of diesel for some of the data centers because they're having rotated power outages. So the internet is going to start degrading, but it outlasted the phone network by many days. And I don't know exactly what the impact of People Finder was, but I know that between text messages and Twitter and just the ability to stay online, a lot of people found each other after the earthquake that would otherwise have wondered, well, where are they and are they okay? So I have direct information from somebody in Japan that the internet was considered one of the great heroes of that day.
Wow.
The example of Japan is a recent one. On 9/11, I lived in New York, and for nearly a week, my only means of communication with my family back in Europe was via the internet, via a local dial-up number, and I really felt it was my lifeline to the rest of the world.
Yes, John, I'd like to answer your question in another way and underline a contrast. We agree with Paul and others that the internet has proven in these dire circumstances of prime importance. But I'm struck by another phenomenon, which is that whereas the people in general are using that, the state has not made much use of it. I'm very struck by that. I've served 3 times in Japan, altogether almost 8 years. I'm a Japanese speaker. I spent most of my last night contacting people in Japan. It's very striking. For instance, TEPCO, the Tokyo Electric Power Company, has made little or no use of social networking in any way. And this is one of the cases of very poor communication from people who have direct responsibility, in this case, giving exact information about fallout to people who are the most affected. Apart from saying, now there's a zone about 30 kilometers in diameter. 30 kilometers from the power station, which is a no man's land. But apart from that, there was very little reliable information. And this is a failure, I think, because obviously it would have been very useful to use this as one of the channels of communication between authority and the affected people, or between the operator of the power station and the people.
Thank you. Carl, did you want to?
Yeah, this is a question most addressed to you, Paul. Did you notice anything which are growing, increasing measures of security or what have you on the net, say DNS sector, which I guess is too new, but are impeding our ability to do speedy recovery when things go badly wrong? Because I'm very concerned that when things go wrong, as they certainly will with some way, that we'll get ourselves stuck. Like I used to have an old VW, I could repair that in the street, a modern car, I can't fix that at all.
So about this internet thing, one of the great, wonderful properties that it has is that something is always broken somewhere, and yet it always appears to work for most of us. That I think will continue to be true. I likewise can't fix modern cars. The internet tends to be built out of pieces that people can fix or have spares for. The people that are in the infrastructure business are, very much ready to do that, and I think they will always have to be, because it's always going to be at the cutting edge of how much power or heat or how many bits or how many, bits per second or megabytes or something. So it's always going to be built out of science fair project toys, and that keeps it very much ready to be repaired. Now, as far as the security angle, I could imagine a situation where an earthquake could prevent you from being able to get to the backup recovery key or backup tapes or something that you would need to then create enough credibility in the core to let other people connect and so forth. But we're well into the realm of science fiction as far as anything that could happen this year or next year. And I'm thinking we're probably not facing that as a danger.
Well, I just wanted to make the point that while you all have been very busy at your conference, there has been a lot of disservice going on the internet about the radiation issue in Japan. Today, and for the last 36 hours, whenever there's a piece of bad news, that explodes on the internet. But when there's a piece of good news about the radiation, for instance, it appears that the radiation that was released in the plume last night decayed very rapidly, which meant that it was a radioactive particle that had a short half-life. And that information did not get perpetrated. And it wasn't just the evildoers that were committing this crime of lack of good news. It was the best news organizations. The New York Times, the Guardian, all of the best news organizations were focusing on the hysterical. Now, not to say that we don't know how bad, we are ignorant about a lot of things, but there was good news.
Well, if you're saying that the media is sensationalist, you might be right in some cases, but I don't know if this has much to do with it.
Yeah, I'm sure you're shooting the wrong messenger. I think Walter Cronkite said it's not news when an airplane takes off and lands, it's only news when it crashes.
Good news don't sell.
Well, but it is news.
Well, you think that perhaps the internet would be a counterweight if what you're saying is true. I mean, so, yes.
But there's a strong element of responsibility. I mean, there's a known fact that people will go into shock, and they can die from shock, from the fear, okay? Lack of communication, and the phobia of my gosh, a nuclear meltdown. That's way overblown. The perspective should be locating survivors and connecting them to their families and getting the medical services. I mean, this is the good news, okay, that prevents people from going into shock. Okay? But our CNN has indicated over and over and over the practice of the flowers that get America. Well, how many strip tests have we had, 90 miles from Las Vegas? How many Hiroshima and Nagasaki? I mean, did this encompass the whole world?
Good point. Perhaps not for this evening. We have three members of the panel who need to catch planes, and we've got a couple minutes left, and I did not want to leave this evening without talking about internet governance. And reading some of the stuff that's been written about the 40th meeting, Michelle Quinn's article in Politico, where she described ICANN as a small cabal that works with the U.S. government. It's not small anymore.
Cabal that works with the U.S. government.
Olivier.
I don't mind the cabal part as long as it's multi-stakeholder and it's open to everyone.
Because you run the cabal.
Well, I would just say, as somebody who, like many on the panel, have followed ICANN since its creation, it sort of went through, like, from the outsiders, a sort of spike at the beginning with this question of, like, legitimacy and governance, and I think, like, those issues have sort of, to my mind, again, I'm a little bit more of an outsider than anybody here who's really involved, but it seems like those issues have spiked, and I think it's not unrelated to what we've seen recently around the world with the idea of actually seeing countries take themselves off the internet. The idea of things that can cause fragmentation suddenly becomes a lot more real, and I think that the increased government interest in what's going on with ICANN in this particular meeting here is very related to what has been going on with the social upheaval, and it sort of really, I think, re-raised this question that academics, sort of blew their minds, like, what is the legitimacy of ICANN, when it was formed, and now I think those questions have, with the new, the questions over the new top-level domains have sort of brought, like, it's been a point to just sort of reopen that question. So that's, I think, as for more of an observer role, it's really interesting to see, like, how does this play out I'm trying not to use any with no acronym statement about ICANN, with the government committee getting involved with the board. So that's me, I think.
Can you hear me? Okay. So I've been involved at ICANN for over 6 years now, and yes, the statement of being a small cabal is true, except as we've heard, it is a very quickly growing cabal of interests. But the problem is it's largely the same interests over and over again. So, for example, the intellectual property rights, the trademark attorneys are very well represented at ICANN, very well. The registrars, the registries, very well represented at ICANN. What isn't terribly well represented at ICANN are people like us, people like you guys, ordinary internet users, non-commercial users. Please indulge me to take this opportunity to encourage you all to please come get involved, because, we can all sit around and complain about ICANN not doing the right thing, but unless we're there to push ICANN to do the right thing, it's never going to do the right thing, because it is so heavily lobbied by these trademark interests, by these governments, that without any pushback, it's not going to do the right thing. And we can't just, kind of sit back and say, oh, well, they say they care about the public interest, they say they care about these things, and so, we're going to trust that they're going to get it right. No, we really need you guys to all come and participate at ICANN. So, join the non-commercial users constituency, join the at-large community. There's lots of ways to get involved and to begin to get involved and have your voices heard and try to influence ICANN to make it be a little bit friendlier to things like freedom of expression and privacy rights and concerns of developing countries. But it isn't going to happen unless you guys get involved and participate. So that's just my little thought.
So I am a member of several committees that have acronyms inside of ICANN. I don't want my mic cut off, so I won't tell you what they are. And to the question of whether it's a cabal, I watched ICANN formed with some alarm, and I watched it grow with occasional alarm. What I can tell you at this moment is that it is not internally unified the way that a cabal would be. There's an awful lot of sort of fighting, and there's a lot of balance of power that goes on inside the organization. It's also honest negotiation that takes place between the U.S. government and ICANN, or between the Government Advisory Committee and ICANN. They're not aligned. There's not a hell of a lot of alignment going on. So to call it a cabal would be to assume that it was just much better organized and synchronized than it is. And that's good, because democracy is messy, and ICANN is messy, so maybe it's democracy.
No, for something completely different. Catalyst. In the 1640s, the end of the 30 Years' War, we had the Treaty of Westphalia, which established what constitutes the modern nation-state, sort of the geographic territory with governance. So, since about 1945, the rise of multinational corporations, with the rise of the internet, we've seen the authority of this kind of sovereign nation-state eroding. The power, the authority has not disappeared. These granules, these little erosions off the sides of the United States and England and other countries are flowing into the hands of bodies like ICANN. What I see as the problem with ICANN is that we've completely forgotten everything we learned in the late 1700s, early 1800s of how to structure authorities of power so they are self-limiting, so they're constrained. We've forgotten constitutional government. That's why ICANN is such an attractive target for bureaucrats, and they are bureaucrats at the Department of Commerce who do not have the authority to create legislation. Come to ICANN, and they do through ICANN exactly what they are prohibited from doing directly in their own jobs. In other words, ICANN has become a great big dog the government agencies can wag to exercise powers they do not have. I view ICANN as a progression towards modern governance, more towards Louis XIV than towards James Madison and Thomas Jefferson.
Careful, Carl. There's nothing almost libertarian.
Hi everyone, my name is Dan Kaminsky. I don't actually, you guys have been doing ICANN for years and years. No, I kind of got dragged into the whole DNS world when I broke it. And it turned out that DNSSEC was happening, and man, it was a good thing. That was a good idea. So I've kind of watched this whole ICANN thing with amusement. I mean, very fresh and new eyes here. Best I can tell, first of all, I think there needs to be some sales scope. Let's remember, for the most part, ICANN manages a 30-kilobyte text file. Like the sheets of paper that you all have, has more information than this big, scary document. As far as I can tell, the number one purpose of ICANN is to say no to really bad ideas from really powerful organizations, and to just throw more and more and more bureaucracy in the way of the bad ideas. And believe me, there were some awful ideas for what to do with DNS. I understand that it is not the constitutional model.
Sorry, what does DNS mean?
I just want to say, I look at the DNS, and for the most part, it's worked pretty well for the last, since ICANN showed up and started managing the room. There's lots of proposals that would not necessarily work as well, and which I can be pretty sure would work way worse. And I'm happy to see all those proposals not go through, and to see what we have continue working.
What's DNS? So, as a relative outsider, I want to ask sort of a 100,000-foot question. Is there anybody in the room or on the panel who would defend or even speak to the notion of ICANN's role moving to the ITU? Is that absolute? I mean, I see it. I see this idea broached from time to time, and I just,
he's held up in Geneva.
Before anybody answers the question, does anybody have a gun?
Well, let me give it a quick try. I've heard some IGF meetings. Oh, sorry. Well, let's just say some UN. I think we can get away with that meeting. And the U.S. They surprise some of the folks in this room, has some geopolitical adversaries. These geopolitical adversaries, led by China, would dearly like, or at least they say they would dearly like, some of the powers that right now ICANN has, for better or for worse, to be shifted to the UN and perhaps some of the UN sub-agencies. This process has been going on a long time, at least 5 years. There's no immediate threat, but this is one reason why the U.S. wanted to give the government that participate in the ICANN process a little bit more power to stop defections, at least in my view. There are a lot of problems with ICANN. I mean, it has what amounts to it levies taxes, what amounts to taxes on domain names that are essentially unappealable. But that might be a lot worse if the UN and the UN sub-agencies had the same responsibilities. At least that's my view. I've followed ICANN on and off since its first meeting in 1998.
I would say the sort of historical reasoning behind moving into the ITU was that originally the idea was that it was supposed to be a technical organization, and I think that since it has become more captured, like as Robin described, as a policy organization, it makes less sense to see it in the ITU context. But it also does sort of go back to that question, which is on the spectrum of freedom across the globe, where you do, I mean, you know, I critique the U.S. almost for a living, but like you have the U.S. on one side and you have other countries down the road, you know, where is the U.S. a positive, you know, just to say it, is it a positive influence or a negative influence? And I think that how you feel on that question determines where you think the power should lie.
So we're coming up on 8 o'clock, and let me just take my power as the moderator to ask one more sort of naive question. I need a translator from the panel or the group. What does it mean when the Obama administration comes to this meeting and calls for accountability and transparency? Everybody hopefully understand.
Elections in 2 years. Elections in 2 years.
Is there a simple...
Well, I don't know if voters are really voting on that versus healthcare and taxes. My view and other folks who follow ICANN more closely, looking at you, are much better equipped to answer this. My view is that they're putting ICANN on notice and they want to reform ICANN from within. They made it very clear yesterday that was their purpose, to avoid more defections and to avoid a greater call to give the UN more authority.
So we are at 8 o'clock. We're still largely acronym free. I want to thank everybody. And Mark, would you like the last word?
Yes.
Sure.
I just wanted to take a moment to thank everyone. I think as town halls go, this was actually a great evening. We had a fantastic panel, fantastic questions, and an excellent Twitter feed. Thank you, Wendy Seltzer. For more information, please visit the Public Voice website. Learn about computers, freedom, privacy, June, Washington, D.C. Get involved with ICANN and stay in contact. Thank you all so much.